everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for tuning in and spending a few moments of your day with me. Today I'm doing part 2 of this requested Mentalism book review, Orion. We're taking a look at book 2, The Pleiades by Phedon Bilek. Now this book picks up where the first one left off, and you're going to find that many of the forces that are used in these routines are the same forces you learned in the first book, but now you're going to learn a wealth of new techniques and different types of routines here. Many of them use business cards, and I would say that the main concept of this book is situational mentalism, although you're still using the idea of imagery in almost every single one of these routines. I'm going to be touching on those routines that I've used extensively over the past 2 years, giving you my own thoughts and ideas, and maybe even some new ideas because I've changed some of these routines, so you may get something out of that. Now the format of the book is exactly the same as the first one, where you're going to find routines with essays interspersed between them and even some guest contributions. So that's pretty much what you can expect. If we start out with the first essay I wanted to touch on, which is called Opacifying the Anagram, there Phedon argues that anagrams are transparent, and he gives you some ideas of how to improve the way you performing an anagram. Although I would argue that they're really not transparent. It's just that many people perform them poorly. That's what the problem is. And if you perform the anagram together utilizing other methods, then it just makes it a lot better. Because if you just perform an anagram by itself, it's hard to sell that so it doesn't look transparent. Just like how if you're going to perform equivoke alone, it's not easy to sell it. You need to be very good at performing it. So I would argue that if you do perform an anagram, it's important that you perform it in a way where it's hidden further by some of the other things that you're doing with it. And I know that may sound a little bit strange, but if you go back and watch my review on star map, you'll see exactly what I mean by that. Now, touching on the idea of star signs, I did find something that was wrong in the book, like an error, because in there he quoted Mark Chandow as saying here's what he said, the first published use of a star sign anagram was Phil Goldstein's Num Persona from Doth in 1987. And actually that's inaccurate, that's not correct. And so when I saw that, I was like, wait, that's not right, and because it's not right. The reality is that back in 1983, Sam Schwartz published a 2-book package which was called Astrology, the Hidden Force, and actually one of the books was a force book that used an anagram style process to be able to divine a spectator's star sign. That was really the first published use of an anagram with a star sign. And then it was 1986 that Bob Farmer came up with an automatic deck, which these were like personality cards. And it was kind of the same idea, that it was using an anagram style to divine a person's star sign. And then later that year, Ray Grismar published his pamphlet, which was What's Your Sign? Now, What's Your Sign was the first Ray's anagram, which could be really attributed to Ray Grismar, and that was later on in that year. So you can see it was actually before Phil Goldstein. And if you do have that, or if you did pick that up, then you also would see that in that same pamphlet, you'll see that he had that effect, which was called like what's your sign or planet, because the person could think of not just their star sign, but also instead they could think of a planet. And he had like an elaborate type of anagram to be able to tell them what they were thinking of. But that is the real origin of the star sign anagram. I just mention it to you guys here because I saw that as an error in the book. People attribute the Ray's anagram to Peter Turner. The reality is that many performers had made the Ray's anagram popular way before Peter Turner, like Alan New, for example. Anyway, I don't want to go too much off on a tangent. Let's get into the first major routine I want to talk about, which is Chiron. So you're going to find this propless routine called Chiron, which is a powerhouse routine. I can't emphasize it enough. And the main reason is because it's a personalized reading that you're going to be giving to the spectator. So if you're into palmistry, I think you're going to like it a lot. Even if you're not into palmistry, I still think that you're going to like it a lot, because the routine is so simple to perform, but it's so strong for the spectator because you're telling them things about themselves. So let me give you an idea of what the routine looks like. So you're going to be telling the person that, you know, you're going to introduce the idea of palmistry. You're going to tell them that you want them to concentrate on one of their fingers, and you have them go through this system where they're going to be picking one of their fingers under the table secretly, and they're going to remember that. And then later on, you're going to be looking at their hand, doing a very simple palm reading, and then you're going to reveal to them which finger they're thinking of in a very clever way, because you have them think about a different scene in their mind based on what finger they've chosen, if they're alone or if they're with people. And the best part about it is that at the very end, he has this idea where, you know, if their idea was that they were on a beach, that he's going to take out of his pocket a seashell and give it to them. You know, or if they were on, like, if they were in a field with flowers, he's going to take out a flower out of his pocket and give it to the spectator, which I think that definitely does strengthen the whole routine a lot. And so I really like this routine a lot because it was so simple. And he goes over the 3 major lines that you can learn if you learn palmistry. It's very simple. You know, the heart line, the head line, the lifeline. There's actually 4 major lines. So I would recommend that if you do like this, that you check out Richard Webster's book. That's the book that I really liked, which is like the complete book of palmistry. It's very simple to read. But the reality is, even without it, you'll still learn what you need to. Just reading Phedon's book here, you'll learn exactly what you need to. And the best part is that because you really have narrowed this down to almost just 2 choices by what the person chose, you're able to make it look like you knew ahead of time what they were going to choose. Now, personally, I don't like to carry a seashell in my pocket or a flower, and so the way that I've adapted it was that I started to use what I would carry around with me was just like an origami flower or seashell, and I would just give that to my spectator. And it's actually kind of funny because if you do this, now you're able to give them something that they could take home with them and they're not going to forget you. Now, this is the way that I started when I would perform this, was I would have this in my pocket, and then as I would do the revelation at the end of, you know, what their image is, what scene, I would be taking this out and opening it up and give it, like if it was the flower, I'd be giving them the flower. If it was a seashell, I would be taking out the seashell and giving it to them, which, I mean, this takes literally like a minute and a half to fold yourself. So what I found out, which was even better than this, and this is what I found out from my own performing, was that I found it's better just to take a little piece of origami paper, and the more colorful, the better. I would recommend something like this, really colorful origami paper. And I put in a few pre-folds so that way I could fold either object very quickly and very easily. And then what I would do is, after they had chosen their finger and I talked to them, I would have them hold on to this for a moment. I would introduce it, have them hold on to it for a moment. And what I would do is I would go into the idea of having them think of, you know, an image based on which finger that they thought of, and I would narrow it down instantly. Because when you read the routine, you're going to see that there's a very simple fishing line in there. But what I found from my own performing it is it's even better if you do this instead. After they're thinking of their image, you say to them, oh, okay, yeah, I think I'm seeing it. I'm getting an idea of where you are. Yes, I know exactly which finger you're thinking of. And I do that. And that will tell you everything. It's kind of a simple, funny idea, because the idea is you're saying, like, I know which finger you're thinking of. But by doing this, you know, if they are thinking of this finger, then they're going to have this huge reaction. You're going to know exactly that you're right on the right cue. And then what I've done is I've actually switched up the reading, where the palm reading I do after I've already started to, like, after I'm folding this and almost done folding it, because it gives you more time, you know, where, so that way you've displaced the palm reading from the revelation of this. So that way I know which finger they're thinking of. Now I can start folding this the right way, so that way I'm going to get the object I want. And while you're telling them about their palm, you're also folding this right in front of them as you're like, let me look at your palm. You start telling them about, you know, their lifeline, their heart line. And while you're doing that, you have all the time in the world to fold this to bake either the seashell or the flower. And if you're interested and you want to learn how to do it, it's so simple, but you can send me an email and I can point you in the right direction so you can learn how to do this. It's so easy to learn. And the best part is that then the spectator is going to be left with this. And it really blows their mind because you're folding it right there in real time as you're like looking at their hand and kind of giving them a very simple reading, right? It almost feels like you're going to tell them like, you know, this is what I'm getting in my mind. It's just going to start to blow them away when they see that you've made this flower and you're like, yes, well, I pictured you in the field with the flowers, and that's just going to totally destroy them. And so this first routine, you're going to use it extensively because it's so easy to perform and because it's personalized to the person, which is why I think it's important that you take a look at it. I've only had some really good reactions with it. So that's the first routine in the book. Moving along to the next routine in the book that I think you're really going to like a lot. The next routine is called Cosmos. And this is a 3 business card routine, which is another powerhouse. And it's very different from other mentalism routines that you're going to find out there, because here the idea that a spectator writes something on writes something down and you reveal it. Here, you're doing this in a roundabout way, which is so strong because you're not actually revealing the information that they write down. You're actually revealing a piece of information that is related to what they write down. And I really like the structure of the routine because here Phedon has introduced almost a non-slight routine. I would say it's almost a non-slight routine because really you're not really doing anything that's a real slight per se. I mean, I would say it's absolute beginner level, but to give you an idea of kind of what this looks like, you take out 3 business cards, you tell a spectator that you want them to think of a place. So they're going to think of a place, you're going to have them write it down on a business card. You put the business card on the table, they see that. Then you take the other 2 business cards and you say, I'm going to write down some ideas I'm getting. You write down something, put that down, and then you write down, and you're like, wait, on second thought, I'm also getting another idea. And you're like, let me write this down. You write that down, and what you're going to do is you're going to have the person go through a very simple process where they're going to think of a person's name, and then they're going to think of an activity of something that they would do at that location. The beauty of the routine is it also has an element of psychometry involved where you have them mix up the cards, and then you have the spectator touch one of the, they're going to select a card, and they are selecting the card that they wrote on. And so then you can reveal the other 2 cards. You're going to say, the card, this one that you selected, take a look at it and see, is that your card? They'll see it's their card. So that's like that's right there's the first hit. Then the next hit is that you're able to, tell them, the activity that they merely thought of. It's the same activity. They could see you wrote it down ahead of time. And then finally, the random name they thought of, you wrote it down before they even thought of it. So again, a very powerful routine, and I think it's really strong because the structure is so different from what you guys see out there. It's not just write something down and reveal it. Like, you don't see that at all here. So here, this is a totally different structure of routine, which makes it really difficult for a spectator to probably try to reverse engineer it in their own mind. They're not going to know how you knew, what you knew, how you like the activity, because the activity you write down, it actually indirectly reveals the location because that activity is specific to that location. Example, if they wrote down, you told them to write down like a place, maybe they write down like, they write down like South Africa, the activity is going to be safari. So the activity is very specific to the location. And if you don't have them think of an activity, you can have them maybe think of a food from that place. And so that indirectly says that you knew what they wrote down, although the card that they wrote down had been on the table the whole time from the beginning. So the reason I emphasize these things to you guys is because it is so strong and so powerful. This is definitely the second routine out of like 3 major routines in this book that I keep going back to again and again, which is why I emphasize you take a look at it. The next routine in the book, Asterion, actually, I didn't really like that routine. I'll be honest with you guys. I really didn't like it because it's almost like a mini Q&A act with a star sign divination. And the reason I didn't like it is because I didn't like the structure of it. I didn't like the idea of using a star sign revelation like that. And the reason is because star sign divination is so powerful, it's so personal, that you definitely should use a totally different method to do a star sign divination. I think it just kind of ruins that, because having somebody write down their birthday and then you reveal their star sign, for me, it just like kind of throws away such a very strong thing you could do, because you can do a propolis star sign divination, which is so much more powerful. So, but I will tell you guys something though, it's not a complete waste, because the routine has some really good ideas if you are going to use an idea of like a one behind Q&A. And let me give you an example of what I mean. What I mean is that if you use a routine like, for instance, like Justin Higgum's The Third Eye, which I went over, there is a ploy here that Phedon gives you, which is absolutely genius, this ploy. And the ploy is that, you know, you're going to write something down on a card and give it to the spectator, and then later on you're going to tell them, you know, I've written something. You're going to read their mind, and then they're curious about what you wrote on the card, but you don't reveal it. You tell them, I want you to take that home with you, and when you're alone and quiet, I want you to read that to yourself. It's going to make sense to you. It's very, very powerful in that way, and I really like the idea of utilizing that in a routine where you're like one behind instead of one ahead. And the example I'm giving you is like Justin Higgum's The Third Eye. This is perfect. If you combine it with that, you can do like a mini Q&A, which is utterly powerful, because you can have that spectator, you know, write down, you know, their question, and what you're doing is you're writing down something and you're going to give it to them, and then you could read their mind. You can do the Q&A revelation, and then you could say, you know, I wrote something down, you know, here, and I want you to take that home, and I want you to read it when you're alone, and it's going to make a lot of sense to you. And I think that that is extremely powerful, because I've had really good reactions with that. And so I would urge you to check it out, because it's really, really clever. Like I said, the thing I didn't like about the routine was the idea of revealing your star sign with it, because I just think that star sign revelation is something you should save for a propolis version. It's just so powerful to do it in a propolis way. So moving along, there's a couple of routines in there. There's a couple more that utilize the very similar kind of principles with business cards that you may like. There's a couple of essays you will like, and then we come to my favorite routine in the whole book, which is lexicon. Now, I've gone over lexicon on my top 5 propolis routines, top 5 propolis effects review, but I can't emphasize enough how powerful lexicon is and how simple it is to perform. It's really easy. You'll learn it in one afternoon, and then you'll have a piece of mentalism that will just absolutely blow people away anytime, anywhere. This is a propolis revelation or divination of a random thought of word is what it is. You have a spectator think of literally almost any word, and you're going to reveal it instantly. And I like to reveal it by writing it on my business card, so that way after they say the word and I reveal it to them, they can take the business card home with them. They'll never forget you. I use this extensively with my patients, especially as kind of like a kind of way of like an icebreaker, because it just absolutely blows people away. And it's, like I said, it's very easy to perform. I think you're going to like it a lot. Now, I would share a live performance of my own of it here with you guys, because I have various audio recordings of my own live performances, but I told you guys that I'm not doing that anymore because people complained. So if you want to listen to one of my live performances of this, then just send me an email and then I'll share it with you. But I'm no longer going to be sharing that here openly on my channel, because people complained about my performances that weren't like a video performance. And so for that reason, I'm not sharing it here. But if you are interested, you can send me a message, especially now that this topic is so popular of revealing a random thought of word, you know, this whole thing with Enigma. If you're on the fence about whether or not you want to buy Enigma, I would highly recommend you send me a message so I can show you a performance of my own of this effect lexicon, and then you'll be like, oh yeah, that is so awesome. No phone, no app, No crazy procedure, no wheel of fortune. No, this is very, very direct, because you're literally going to be asking the spectator like 2 or 3 things. You'll narrow down their word like this instantly. It's so easy, and it'll just absolutely blow them away. They won't have any clue how this is possible. So this really is the effect that you're looking for. This really is. Moving along, the next version of this that Phedon introduces, he introduces a version that's like for a large audience. So if you perform for large audiences, you might like that, like on stage or something. I don't do that, so I really don't use that. And then he also gives you an idea from, I think it was Tom Duncan, where you are, because sometimes when you perform lexicon, there's a chance that if the spectator doesn't follow your instruction completely, things could go off the rails. And so I would tell you that like my success rate with it is like 90%. But Tom Duncan had this really, I think his name was Tom Duncan. Yeah, Tom Duncan had this really clever idea where you'll be able to know in real time whether or not you're going down the right path. Because I guess if you're not going down the right path, you could always take out your business cards and have them write down their word on your business card if you wanted to. But I thought that Tom Duncan's idea is a great idea. The funny part's this: after performing this now for years, like I don't even mess with it anymore, because the reality is, even if I don't hit it, I don't really care. And the main reason is because I use this as kind of like, hey, let's do this, let's try this as a warm-up. So I tell the person, when you listen to my live performance, you'll see how I say to the person, you know, this doesn't always work, but sometimes it works. You know, and then when you hit, it's extremely strong, because, you know, there's so many possibilities they could have thought of. When they think back to it, like I could have thought of any word I wanted to, and somehow you knew it. And so it's very, very strong in that way. So moving along after that, there's a couple more essays in the book. Specifically, there's an essay that's called Casting a Wider Net, which is a powerhouse essay, my favorite essay in the book. And it's more because Phedon really goes over this idea of how to connect with your spectator, how to turn somebody into an instant sitter to perform for them. I really liked some of the verbal tools he gives you, like the verbal devices. Like I would call like, there's a concept he gives you that's called through the prism, which is definitely a very interesting verbal device to be able to communicate with your spectator. Almost really to entertain them. And I really like this one line in the book. I'm going to actually read it to you guys. This is what it was. It said this: make no mistake, if they don't feel like $1 million right now, they're either bullshit proof or you're doing something wrong. And I have to totally agree with that. He's right about that. And I think you're really going to like that essay a lot. You're going to take a lot from it, which is why I'm telling you guys, you should definitely take a look at that. Afterwards, there's another routine there that's called Over Space and Time. And this is a great routine. It does utilize an assistant, but the routine is something that you could perform like in a small group setting, or maybe some people want you to see something, they want to see something, and you have them put out 5 objects or 6 objects, and you say, okay, let's try this. Put out like 5 objects, and then you say, look, let's call my friend. You call your friend on the phone, and then you tell the person to just point to an object, and while the person's on speakerphone, you say, okay, they're pointing at an object, what do you think it is? And they just tell them instantly over the phone what the object is. So it's almost like the effect, the wizard, but it's a little bit different, because obviously it's not a playing card, it's with objects. A very powerful effect, very easy to perform, very clever, the method, but it does utilize an accomplice, so you have to have somebody there that's going to participate with you. But I really liked it a lot. It's totally different from anything else you're going to find in the book. Afterwards, there's a couple of guest effects that are contributed. Fake Call by Christoph Ambrose, probably the 4th routine that I've used extensively from this book, and I would highly recommend it to you guys. This was my favorite guest contribution in this book. In the routine, you take out your phone and it's on the table. You have the spectator select a card, and then based on the card that they select, they come up with a random name. Now, in real time, your phone starts to ring. The name on the screen is the name that they're merely thinking of. You answer it, and the person on the phone says, I don't know why, but I had this card just entered my mind, and this will absolutely destroy your spectator. Now, of course, this does use a phone app. The nice thing is that the app is absolutely free, and you may have a hard time finding it. So if you do, you can message me and I can tell you which is the right app, because you don't have to pay for it. So it's important that you understand that. And I really liked the whole procedure of it. In fact, you may even decide to buy a one-way forcing deck after you learn the routine, because you want to give your spectator a completely free choice of a card. Even if you don't use a one-way forcing deck, I would argue that you should use at least like 10 or 15 duplicates, so that way you can let your spectator take any card they want from a spread, so that way it feels like they had a completely free choice of the card that they selected. And then the beauty of the whole procedure is that the name they choose is based on the card that they selected, and you give them more choices because you let them choose that name relatively freely, and it's very, very strong. It's extremely strong. Of course, it does use the principle that Phedon introduced in the first book, Phasma, to be able to, whittle down that name very quickly. And when that phone rings, it's going to just destroy the spectator. So anyway, I would argue that this is the fourth effect in the book that is the strongest, just from my own usage of it. Moving along, there's a couple of other guest contributions in the book, and then there's another card routine. There's a couple of other card routines at the very end. I will just mention that the card routine Hades is a two-phase card routine that some people might like. A spectator takes a card out of the deck and puts it in their pocket, sight unseen, and then you have them peek a card. You're going to reveal the card that they peeked using imagery, of course. You're going to have them think about, imagery based on the card that they selected. And then you're going to have them come up with another card, and that's the card that's in their pocket. He does use Joshua Quinn's Deck-Evoke procedure, which of course was made popular by Colin McLeod in his Opening Minds DVD, which he probably is introducing the same thing in his latest effect, which was called Ocean. I suspect it. But this routine may appeal to you. Personally, it's not something that I would use, but I just mention it here for completeness sake. Anyway, that's the most important things I wanted to go over in the book. Again, I would emphasize that you take a look at those routines I've mentioned, specifically Chiron, Cosmos, and of course, Lexicon, the ultimate propless word divination effect that I think you're going to use and abuse, just like how I have. As usual, if you have any questions or comments about this review, please leave them for me below. I've tried to give you a good idea of what you can expect in this book. I hope this has been useful to you. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next review.